Good evening. Hope everybody's having a great week. Jimmy here in Chicago. I got an interesting story for you tonight. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. We're going to talk about the murder of trucking executive Michael Cagnoni. I did a story on him earlier. This is going to be a follow-up story, and we're going to go into a little bit more depth. But check out the story I did on the killing of Michael Cagnoni in some of my previous videos. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Pray for us in Chicago during the Democratic National Convention. Can you imagine if the outfit were running our country? But let's get into it. We're going to talk about what I call a three-headed monster, right? If you're a defendant at the Dirksen Federal Building facing serious federal charges, this is what you're going up against. These are some of the best U.S. attorneys in the country. You got U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, in the middle, Gary Shapiro, and at the end with the glasses, the late Mitch Mars. These guys locked up all the Chicago outfit bosses, all the Chicago outfit made members, and most of the associates. Men like Joey Lombardo, Rocky and Felice, Sam Carlisi. Current guys like Mikey Sarno, Nick Gio, Jimmy Marcello are all rotting away in a jail cell because of these guys. The Chicago outfit guys despise the government. And one of the main reasons is the rats, the informants that the government cuts deals with in order to convict their real targets. They make a deal with the devil to go after their big fish. At one of the trials I went to, you had two crooked cops visiting a mob boss in prison, talking in code, talking shit about some of the prosecutors, about how they were behind their indictments. Then you had a couple mob bosses accused of threatening prosecutors and federal judges. But we're going to start with Mitch Mars, the lead prosecutor at the Family Secrets trial. He's got Nick Calabrese on the stand. First time ever there was a made member of the Chicago outfit that flipped and cooperated. So Mitch Mars has him on the direct. Mitch Mars says, "Mr. Calabrese, I'm going to ask you about the murder of a man named Michael Cagnoni. Ask if you had an occasion to participate in that homicide." Nick replied, "Yes, I did. Can you tell us for the record, when, if you recall, when did that murder take place?" Now, Nick's sitting there in his blue jumpsuit with his white gym shoes on, facing straight ahead at the jury, never once looked back. June of 1981. Now, the murder itself took place in June of 1981. Was there any sort of planning that occurred? I'll stop right there. There was a lot of planning, a lot of careful planning that went on in the killing Cagnoni. The outfit crew had a hell of a time getting a tail on him. Once they put together a plan on how to kill him, it took several attempts. Meanwhile, the bosses, men like this in Carlisi and Iupa, were getting a little antsy, were getting a little impatient. Now, the murder itself took place in 1981. Was there any sort of planning? Nick says yes. And approximately when? If you remember, when was it that the topic of Cagnoni came to your attention? Nick said, well, it was sometime towards the end of 1980. He took a ride with his brother. His brother had to meet Angelo LaPetria and his brother Jimmy LaPetria. Nick says he dropped him off at a restaurant and waited for him to come out. You waited in your car? Yes. And did you see him go into the restaurant? Yes. Did you see the people who he met with? No, I did not. And how long was he in the restaurant? Nick replied, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, a half hour. What happened when he came back? He said, we got some work to do. And that he had an address, 2 addresses and a name. Now, on that piece of paper, Nick Calabrese testified that one was the address of his work, where his trucking yard was, off of Damon, off of Blue Island and Damon, huge, massive trucking yard. And the other was his home on Vine Street in Hinsdale. Vine Street is a very expensive suburb, western suburb of Chicago. And Nick said that whenever they would refer to Cagnoni's house, they would call it wine. You know, vine and grapes, code word, vine, wine, wine. So that was their code word anytime they talked about Cagnoni's place. They also go on to say how they start to stake him out. They've got a couple guys staking him out at his house, a couple guys staking him out at his yard, and they could never really find him. So Mitch Mars says, do you know whether Petrocelli or any of his crew also were involved in targeting Michael Cagnoni? Nick replied, yes, the Wild Bunch crew. My brother is the one that told me that because he said Angela told him the Cagnoni hit is one of those Wild Bunch things. And what Angelo meant was originally the contract was given to the Wild Bunch crew, the Taylor Street guys, but they couldn't get a good tail on Cagnoni and never carried it out. So the contract was canceled and given to the Chinatown Crew. Did anybody, including your brother, tell you why? Why was Michael Cagnoni killed? Mitch Mars asked. Later on, I found out that it had something to do with Joe Ferriola, with the trucks and stuff like that, that it had to do with money. And what was Ferriola's interest in the trucks? Mars asked. I think either he was arming them or wanted the business or something like that. So, according to Nick Calabrese, and we found also this out later, was Michael Cagnoni was paying the outfit street tax every week, thousands of dollars a week like clockwork. Never once missed the payment. However, for legal businesses, he had to start paying them by sending money from his bank account into one of their bank accounts. He even showed them the process, how easy it would work and how better off everybody was. But Ferriola, Carlisi, Iupa, these old school Mohicans, these old school mustaches, they want cash. So that's how it started. Eventually, Cagnoni couldn't continue to pay them in cash. He had a fallout with these guys because they wouldn't accept any other payment besides cash. Michael Cagnoni started carrying a gun. He also had 24-hour surveillance around him. So Nick goes on to say that Frank Furio, made member of the 26th Street Crew, he's got the old man's ear. Mitch Mars replied, well, who's the old man in this conversation? Joey Iupa. And during the family secrets trial, anytime they referred to Iupa, they called him the old man. So they're talking about targeting Cagnoni, right? The crew's tailing him. And they're talking about some of the men involved. A lot of guys. There were a lot of guys that were involved in the planning and killing of Michael Cagnoni. This went on for months. So obviously you got Joe Ferriola. He's the one that gave the original green light to the Wild Bunch crew. They couldn't carry it out. Then it was given to Angelo's crew. Without Nick's testimony, this would have been one of over 1,000 unsolved murders by the outfit. This was one of the 14 murders, the Cagnoni murder, that Nick went into great detail on. Other guys involved in the planning were Ronnie Jarrett. Frank Calabrese obviously had a heavy hand in the killing and planning of Michael Cagnoni. John Feccarata was involved. Poker was involved. Johnny Apes was involved. So that's a lot of guys that were involved in killing one man. That shows how important it was for the outfit to get rid of Cagnoni. So now we'll get back to the transcripts. Let's see here. So their first plan, they were going to use Jimmy DeForti. This guy, they called him Poker because he liked to play poker. They also called him Rota, which in Italian means tires, because he was a master guy with cars, gearhead, driver, breaking into cars, some heavy work for the outfit, even hits out west, very dangerous guy. Frank Calabrese at first, when the indictment came down, that he was going to inform, become a snitch, but he never did. He would not talk to the FBI and stand-up made member Chicago outfit right here. But Poker was involved. He was going to break into Michael Cagnoni's car and plant the explosive. That was the first plan. So that's what Nick's talking about. They also said that they knew that Michael Cagnoni drove a 4-door green Mercedes, and Nick had a similar car by his house. They talked about the use of walkie-talkies. There was a lot of talk about walkie-talkies and transmitters that they would use on surveillance and on scores. It said the surveillance started out in December, and then it didn't stop for Christmas, and then it resumed again time after. After Christmas it started again. One time Nick Calabrese said he followed Michael Cagnoni all the way out to Rockford, and then he realized that Cagnoni was at a funeral, so Nick turned around and went home. Rockford's a good 2-hour drive from Chicago. So that just shows you how much they were tracking every move Michael Cagnoni made. But again, they had a hell of a time getting a good tail on him. So they finally decided they couldn't really get up close with him and kill him their usual way by shooting him with a shotgun or jumping him, strangling him, and killing him. They decided to use a bomb. Nick Calabrese talked about they had several different garages, one in Cicero, one in Melrose Park, but their favorite garage was Ronnie Jarrett, mother-in-law's garage house. You wouldn't believe the amount of criminal activity that went on in this garage. They whacked guys in here. They worked on work cars. They modified guns. They stashed stolen goods here, stolen guns. But this is where they started making the bomb that was used in killing the Michael Cagnoni. But if Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law had any idea what her son was doing. So now Nick Calabrese is talking about how his brother went to Michael Spilotro. Let's see here. He says, well, you use a remote control. My brother decided to go see Michael Spilotro to see he can order some of these remote starters for him, and he ordered 10 of them. So Michael Spilotro provided those devices to Frank Calabrese Sr. That ties him to the murder of Michael Cagnoni. This guy was no angel. He was definitely a mob guy wannabe, hanging on to his brother Tough Tony's coattails. He was selling blow out of his restaurant, which was against the rules. All of his friends were criminals, burglars, thieves. And here's the Calabrese brothers talking about how Michael was good friends with Frank and Nick and the entire family, providing him with the remote starters. A lot of people don't know that. So we'll get back to the testimony. And do you know where Michael Spilotro got them? No. How many did you say Michael Spilotro acquired? I should say 10. Do you know if he had to buy them from Mr. Spilotro? Yes. Well, blah, blah, blah. So he talks about hiding them in the garages. Now they're planning the bomb. The first bomb that they decided to build, they tested it. It wasn't strong enough. So they decided they had to go with a larger antenna. Then they started making a second bomb, but this particular bomb went off in Frank Calabrese's hand and almost blew off his thumbs. Now Nick's talking about the work car. They called it Blondie. They always had a couple really hyped up special custom work cars. He's talking about the one that he would call it Blondie. He says that Feckerata was driving. His brother was in the passenger seat. He was in the back seat with DeForti. Now picture those four guys in the car. Jimmy DeForti, Nick and Frank Calabrese, and John Feckerata. He said his brother put his hand inside the bag where the explosive was with the cap, and we had a walkie-talkie with us, and somebody keyed the walkie-talkie. When they keyed the walkie-talkie, the detonator cap blew off in Frank Calabrese's hand. It nearly blew off his thumbs. That's how close Frank Calabrese came to losing his thumbs. My brother was going to put the cap inside the explosive. Just before he did that, when somebody keyed the mic, it set it off. Can you imagine it? Inside the car? After, when Frank Calabrese was on the stand, when Joe Shark Lopez asked him, hey, did you almost blow off your hand when you had the detonator, the blasting cap in your hand? And Frank Calabrese denied it, and he started twiddling his thumbs back and forth, showing the jury that there was nothing wrong with his thumbs. They asked, did Frank Calabrese require hospitalization? After that, he did, but they took him to a special doctor, Dr. Renzino. That was a neighborhood doctor in Bridgeport. Kind of reminds me of the veterinarian doctor that Nick went to when he shot Feckerata. So they're just talking about the all the planning that went on in the killing Michael Cagnoni. Now, these are some of the men involved. You got Jimmy DeForti, Johnny Apes. He took over as boss when the Calabrese brothers went away, and when Angelo died, he's the one that gave the order to kill Ronnie Jarrett. But Johnny Apes participated on the planning of Michael Cagnoni. DeForti participated in it. John Feckerata had a role. Frank Calabrese had a big role in the murder of Michael Cagnoni, Ronnie Jarrett, and Nick Calabrese. Now, after getting the right antenna, which made the bomb strong enough to ignite, they had the work car, they had the stolen plates. Now they were going to park the work car off to the side of the ramp, pull up and use a detonator switch when Michael Cagnoni entered the ramp on 294. So everything was all set. But this particular day, Mrs. Cagnoni and her kid took the Mercedes that day. And if she would have exited the ramp on a 294, it would have detonated. Her and the kid would have exploded. Luckily, she went the wrong way. She missed the ramp. She had no clue how close she came to losing her life until she heard the evidence on her husband, the guy who killed him, the guys that killed Michael Cagnoni. She was in court every day, Michael Cagnoni's widow. But this was the only time that Nick Calabrese ever showed emotion in his weeks of being on the stand, talking about 14 murders. A couple of them were his good friends. One of them, John Mendel, he slit the guy's throat from ear to ear. This was the only time Nick Calabrese got emotional. Nick Calabrese testifies, Michael Cagnoni's wife had taken the car with the kid in it, with her stepson. Oh, yeah, and I think he said stepson, and drove him to school. When I heard that, I just, oh, no, I don't know what I felt. All I kept thinking was, this poor woman, if she would have gotten this car and came the opposite way, that bomb would have went off because the remote was set. If she had come east instead of going west, that bomb would have went off. Now Joe the Shark Lopez, Frank Calabrese, he gets up there and says, I'm going to object. The judge says the answer may stand. Mitch Mars, did you ever get into an argument with your brother over this? Meaning the close call, the lady and the kid getting killed. After Feckerata left, I got into an argument with my brother about this happening. And with that, he hit me on the left side of the face. Frank Calabrese punched Nick Calabrese right in the face because Nick was upset that the lady almost got killed accidentally. And during this, Frank Calabrese is laughing out loud, shaking his head, staring, glaring right at his brother. How hard did he hit you? Lopez, objection. Court overruled. At the time, I didn't know, but he hit me hard enough that later on that year, he had to go to a doctor because during the cold weather, cold Chicago's weather, his face started hurting a lot. Nick Calabrese testified that he found out later there's a bone that runs across your face, and he's motioning with a Z, that he fractured the bone. What is the name of the bone? Well, the bone fractured the brother, going on and on. Lopez's objection. Frank Calabrese is laughing. And he said, did you require medical attention for that injury? Nick said he had to have operated on. So Frank Calabrese cracked him so hard in the head, it fractured his bone, requiring surgery years later. But you could see Frank Calabrese did not fuck around. Can you imagine if Frank Calabrese would have got a hold of Nick Calabrese or Junior while they were in the stand? The murder itself took place in June of 1981, but they didn't actually plan the. They didn't begin the planning until later that year. So again, let's recap now. Let's recap here. We got Michael Cagnoni, trucking executive, 37 years old, paying the outfit thousands of dollars a week, has a fallout with them. This is what happens to him. They took his body away in 3 body bags. When he turned left, after his wife nearly got killed, when he turned left after several failed attempts on that ramp getting onto 294, his body parts in Mercedes were blown to smithereens. 3 body bags of parts to carry him away. These are actually crime scene photos. This was one of the 14 murders that Nicky Calabrese testified to, and a lot of planning went into this. Again, Michael Spilotro, he's the one that provided 10 remote starters to his good friend Frank Calabrese. Michael Spilotro's lucky he didn't get indicted for the Michael Cagnoni murder. One of several warehouses, stash houses. They've had them all over in Cicero, City, Chicago, Melrose Park. It's my favorite one in Bridgeport. This is where they modified the gun that was used to kill Sam Giancana. This is where they would work on their work cars. They would give each work car certain nicknames. This is also where they planned one of the bombs, the initial bombs, in the Michael Cagnoni murder. Joe Ferriola, as I said, his life was cut way too short. We lost a great leader. But Iupa, kind of like Carlisi in Carlisi and Iupa, he believed in violence. He believed in fear. He wanted every single illegal bookie, illegal criminal activity to pay street tax. And the ones that were paying, he wanted it doubled. And the ones that got out of line, they were taken care of. But this was a legend in the Chicago outfit. Joe Ferriola, he would not accept any other payment besides cash for the extortion, street tax, whatever you want to call it, that Michael Cagnoni was paying the outfit weekly. And as a result, Ferriola gave the order to the Wild Bunch crew. Typical Wild Bunch crew, these guys really couldn't get the job done. Then it was given to Angelo the Bull, boss of the 26th Street crew. He put his crew together. It took him a while after several failed attempts, but they eventually pulled it off. Without Nick Calabrese's testimony, that crime, along with several others, would have never have been solved. Nick Calabrese participated in that murder and gave great detail. We'll continue to go through Nick Calabrese's transcripts. It's just a lot to read, and there's so much to go through. Ronnie Jarrett, he participated in the planning of killing Michael Cagnoni, making the bomb, working on the white work car, getting the plates. Frank Calabrese, as we know, almost blew off his thumbs when the detonator cap went off in the car. He gladly showed the ladies and gentlemen of the jury when he took the stand in his own defense that there was nothing wrong with his thumbs. Later on, though, the government had him x-rayed when he was in prison to show that there was definitely damage done to his hands from the detonator cap. John Stoop, one of the best wheelmen in Chicago, he eventually got killed by his best friend Nick Calabrese after the botched burial of the Splatro brothers. But he was an active participant in the planning and killing of Michael Cagnoni. Poker, we talked about. Rhoda Tires, he participated in the planning of Michael Cagnoni as well. Johnny Apes, very dangerous guy here. But look at the aftermath, right? That's what was left of his green Mercedes-Benz. I remember during court, the widow, Mrs. Cagnoni, she sat through court every day, crying, pretty dramatic. She yelled out loud, calling Nick Calabrese the devil. The judge stopped court. He cleared the courtroom, removed the jury from the room. He reprimanded her. He warned her. Fast forward towards the end of the trial. I think she thought Frank Calabrese was staring at her because sometimes Frankie Breeze would look into the visitors gallery. And she yelled out loud, "You son of a bitch, you killed my husband." Frank Calabrese looked at her, smiled, and said, "May God be with you." I couldn't help but laughing. The federal marshals escorted the widow out. I think she even had a heart attack in the hallway. And I forgot to mention when poor Michael Cagnoni was killed. Again, he was only 37 years old. His father, Mr. Cagnoni, died of a heart attack.